Do you remember the first time someone told you who you were supposed to be? Not the person you felt you were inside, but the version the world expected you to be? For Amara, it began before she even knew what choice meant. Her parents gave her a name, told her which religion to follow, reinforced rules, and guided her behavior long before she had the words to question it. Love and safety came with strings. Approval had to be earned, curiosity carefully contained. Sit properly, Amara, her mother said, smoothing the folds of her dress. Use your inside voice, her father reminded her, as if sound itself could shape character. Smile when someone greets you, a visiting aunt added. These weren't just instructions. They were messages about value, acceptability, and belonging. Psychologists like Eric Erikson explained that early childhood experiences shape identity formation. Every compliment, correction, and unspoken rule becomes a mental blueprint. Amara learned early that to be safe, she must perform. Be polite, be obedient, be seen, but not fully known. Even playtime carried lessons. When she expressed anger or questioned an adult, she was told, that's not how a good girl behaves. Curiosity and rebellion, the very traits that would one day fuel creativity and self-discovery, were quietly pushed aside. Meanwhile, media reinforced these messages. Storybooks, cartoons, and advertisements depicted ideal children. Polite, clever, productive, likable. Success and happiness were not inherent. They were conditional, measured against external standards. Bandura's social learning theory explains that children imitate rewarded behaviors and suppress punished ones. Each day, Amara's persona, the mask she presented to survive and be loved, grew more intricate. By the time she turned 7, she had internalized a fundamental lesson. Approval equals safety. Independence equals risk. Her authentic self, the messy, curious, vulnerable, angry, playful child, was quietly buried. And though she did not realize it at the time, the mask she wore was forming a template for her perception of herself for years to come. Even the small details mattered. How she held a pencil, the tone of her voice, the way she answered questions, all became part of a growing narrative. I am only valuable if I meet expectations. And yet, the part she suppressed, her imagination, anger, curiosity, and impulsive joy, did not disappear. They were quietly moving into what Jung called the shadow, a hidden realm of the psyche that shapes behavior in unseen ways. Amara would not meet this shadow consciously for many years, but was already influencing her feelings, her fears, and her earliest interactions with the world. Before we go deeper, take a moment to reflect. How did your earliest experiences shape your own self-perception? And if you're drawn to stories about human behavior, psychology, and self-discovery, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share this video with someone who might need it. Because what you're about to hear isn't just Amara's story, it's a mirror for every time you've worn a mask without realizing it. School arrived like a second mirror, one that reflected not just Amara's abilities, but what society valued in a child. She walked into her classroom on the first day, backpack tight against her shoulders, eyes wide with curiosity. But the first messages came quickly. Amara, your handwriting is messy. Try harder, the teacher said, scanning her notebook with a critical eye. Math isn't your strongest subject, another teacher remarked casually. These comments felt small, almost inconsequential, but they carried weight. Psychologists call this internalized social feedback, messages from authority figures that shape how children see themselves. Amara began to doubt. Maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe I need to fix myself to be worthy. At first, she tried. She worked harder, erased letters, and repeated math problems, hoping that her efforts would earn approval. And for a while it did. Praise reinforced compliance. Success reinforced self-doubt, an invisible cycle quietly molding her self-perception. Her friends were another mirror. During group activities, Amara had ideas bubbling inside her, creative solutions she believed were brilliant. But when she shared them, the response was mixed. A classmate laughed. Another ignored her suggestion. And just like that, Amara learned. Speaking out could be risky. Conformity was safe. Dissent invited judgment. This aligns with Solomon Asch's conformity experiments, which demonstrate that individuals often adjust their opinions to match a group, even when they know the group is wrong. Amara's early self-perception became a negotiation, her authentic ideas versus social acceptance. Even textbooks and lesson plans carried subtle propaganda. They celebrated the ideal student, neat, polite, obedient, and high-achieving. Straying from these norms, asking unusual questions, showing strong emotion, or expressing creativity, was subtly discouraged. Amara's persona, already forming at home, now gained reinforcement in the classroom. Over time, she stopped raising her hand impulsively. She smiled when bored, agreed when unsure, and silenced ideas that she feared were wrong. Her inner life, the natural curiosity, anger, and playfulness she had once felt, was hidden beneath a mask crafted for acceptance. And yet, as Jung would warn, the parts of herself that were suppressed did not disappear. They moved into the unconscious, shaping her thoughts, judgments, and reactions in ways she did not yet see. What she didn't realize was that this mask, reinforced daily by teachers, peers, and society, was starting to define her self-perception. Before we continue, reflect on this. In your own school years, which comments or feedback shaped your self-view? Which ones were subtle, like whispers, that you carried into adulthood? If you're finding this reflection meaningful, remember to subscribe, leave a like, and comment your thoughts. Your story, like Amara's, deserves to be seen, and understand it is a first step toward freeing yourself from the mask society encourages you to wear. By the time Amara reached middle school, the classroom was no longer the only mirror shaping her identity. Friends, social groups, and subtle societal norms became equally powerful forces. She wanted to belong, to be liked, to feel accepted, but belonging came with invisible rules. At lunch, she noticed a group of girls laughing over fashion choices and weekend plans. Amara had her own ideas, dreams that felt bright and unusual, but she hesitated to share them. What if they laughed? What if she was weird? So she nodded, agreed, and mirrored their opinions. The mask she wore home and in class now expanded to the social sphere, carefully tailored to avoid rejection. This is precisely what social psychologists call peer influence. According to Philip Zimbardo, humans are wired to seek social acceptance. Conformity ensures survival in both literal and psychological terms. The cost, however, is often self-suppression. Amara learned that her authentic thoughts could be dangerous, not because they were wrong, but because they were unpopular. The effects were subtle, almost invisible at first. She laughed at jokes she didn't find funny. She reframed her own dreams to match the group's aspirations. Even her gestures, posture, and tone were adapted to fit in. Over time, these adjustments became automatic, habits that reinforced her self-perception as someone who must perform to belong. And yet, the shadow remained. Every now and then, when she was alone, Amara felt flickers of frustration or sadness, inexplicable irritations at small injustices, or fleeting bursts of creativity. These moments were suppressed expressions of the self that society's unspoken rules had deemed unacceptable. Jung emphasized that the unconscious always seeks expression. Amara's hidden parts were quietly shaping her interactions, judgments, and even her choice of friends. Social pressure wasn't limited to her immediate peers. School culture, media, and early advertising created shared ideals. Popularity, beauty standards, academic performance, and extracurricular achievements became benchmarked for worth. Propaganda is not only political, it is cultural, and it operates by shaping norms and standards subtly, repeatedly, until they feel like natural truth. Amara's self-perception, now filtered through multiple layers, family, teachers, friends, society, was a carefully constructed reflection of what the world rewarded, rather than what her soul demanded. One afternoon, a heated discussion erupted in the group. Amara had a strong opinion about a story they were analyzing in literature class. Her words faltered as she remembered the unspoken rule: agreement equals acceptance. She swallowed her thoughts, smiled politely, and conformed. That moment, seemingly trivial, reinforced a profound truth. Fear of rejection often outweighs the need for authenticity. Pause for a moment and reflect. In your own life, how often have you silenced your true thoughts, emotions, or desires to fit in? Which friendships or social situations rewarded performance over authenticity? If this resonates, remember to share your thoughts in the comments, like the video, and subscribe. Stories like Amara's help us see the invisible pressures shaping self-perception, and recognizing them is a first step toward reclaiming your true identity. As Amara grew older, the mirrors around her multiplied. School, peers, and family were no longer the only forces shaping her self-perception. Society itself became a powerful, invisible teacher. Television, magazines, advertisements, and social media offer relentless lessons about who she should be, what she should desire, and how she should look. Even seemingly harmless commercials were propaganda in action. Bright smiles, flawless skin, perfect bodies, and happy families weren't just selling products. They were selling ideals. Ideals that quietly suggested, if you don't look, act, or achieve this way, you are less than. Psychologists call this normative social influence. We internalize societal standards even without conscious awareness. Amara's morning started scrolling through online feeds. Friends posted glamorous weekend outings, awards, or accomplishments. Influencers flaunted effortless beauty and confidence. Amara, who had spent years shaping herself to fit family, teachers, and peers, now faced a society-wide set of expectations she couldn't possibly meet. And yet, she tried, because trying meant belonging. Trying meant survival. In this stage of life, propaganda works subtly but powerfully. George Gerbner's cultivation theory explains that repeated exposure to media shapes our perception of reality. The more Amara consumed idealized images of success, beauty, and achievement, the more she unconsciously aligned her self-perception to match them. Her authentic preferences, insecurities, and quirks, once vibrant in her child imagination, were now filtered through an external lens of societal approval. At school and at home, she had learned to perform. In society, the stakes felt even higher. She compared herself constantly. Why don't I look like her? Why wasn't my weekend as exciting? Why am I not as talented, as smart, as funny? Each thought chipped away at her self-worth. Each like, comment, or subtle social approval reinforced the persona she was cultivating. Composed, likable, and acceptable. Even the news carried messages, often masked as common sense or cultural norms. Career paths, gender roles, and acceptable behaviors were framed as universal truths. What was considered good or bad was reinforced repeatedly until deviation felt like a personal failure. Propaganda isn't always blatant. It is embedded in daily life, shaping self-perception from infancy through adulthood. One afternoon, Amara attended a school debate. A classmate confidently presented an unpopular opinion, challenging the status quo. The room erupted with whispers and eye rolls. Amara felt a familiar fear stir inside her. What if she spoke differently? What if she was judged? She stayed silent, nodding politely. Her authentic ideas trapped behind the mask she'd been building for years. Reflect on this. How often does society, media, or culture silently dictate your self-perception? Which aspect of yourself have you hidden to fit the acceptable mold? And how does that hidden self influence your daily choices, relationships, and ambitions? If this resonates, remember to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share this story with someone who might need it. Amara's experience isn't unique. It reflects a universal struggle between authenticity and societal expectation. Recognizing the invisible propaganda shaping your self-perception is a first step toward reclaiming a life that is truly yours. By the time Amara reached high school, the mirrors she faced multiplied exponentially. Social media became a constant presence, amplifying every expectation she had already internalized. It was no longer just school, family, or traditional media shaping her self-perception. The entire digital world was watching, judging, and rewarding behavior she learned to perform. Every feed scroll was a lesson. Photos of friends traveling, acing tests, achieving awards, or showing off curated aesthetics whisper an unspoken message. Your life is incomplete. Your self is insufficient. Even moments of personal joy felt inadequate unless they could be packaged, posted, and approved. Psychologists describe this phenomenon as social comparison theory, developed by Leon Festinger, which explains that we determine our own worth by comparing ourselves to others. Online, the comparison was relentless and carefully curated. Amara found herself trapped in subtle cycles of envy and self-judgment. A friend posted a flawless sketch, and she questioned the value of her own creativity. Another shared a perfect weekend, and her spontaneous adventure felt meaningless. Every like and comment became a measure of acceptance. Every post a reflection of social worth. Even her interactions with peers reinforced a mask she had been cultivating for years. In group chats, she carefully crafted messages to seem witty, polite, or confident. Offline, she mirrored the humor, opinions, and behaviors of friends to avoid rejection. Her authentic voice, the quirks, doubts, and impulses she once celebrated, remained hidden. Albert Bandura's research on observational learning shows that repeated exposure to rewarded behaviors strengthens the likelihood of imitation. The more Amara observed what was celebrated online, the more she adjusted herself to match it. One evening, after a long day, she scrolled through posts of classmates celebrating academic achievements. Anxiety and self-doubt surged. She remembered the teacher's critique from years ago. Math isn't your strength. The memory triggered a familiar internal dialogue. Maybe I'm not enough. Maybe I'll never measure up. The combination of past feedback and present social comparison was overwhelming, reinforcing her persona while further burying her true self. Yet, even in these moments, the shadow whispered. When she was alone, she sketched characters in a notebook no one would see. She daydreamed about careers or adventure society considered impractical. She laughed at jokes only she understood. Jung would argue these moments were glimpses of the unconscious seeking expression, proof that her authentic self had not disappeared, only been suppressed. Pause and reflect. How often does digital life influence your sense of worth? Which parts of yourself have you hidden to meet external expectations? And how might the act of observing your own behaviors, without judgment, begin to loosen the grip of these digital mirrors? If this reflection resonates, remember to subscribe, like, and share this video. Amara's experience is a mirror for all of us living in a world saturated with curated lives and constant social comparison. Recognizing the masks we adopt online is another step toward reclaiming authenticity and understanding our self-perception. By the time Amara entered university, the mask she had built over years of feedback, social comparison, and societal messaging felt heavier than ever. She excelled academically, maintained a polished social persona, and navigated friendships with care. But inside, a quiet dissonance was growing. She felt restless, exhausted by constant performance, and haunted by questions she had long ignored. Who am I if no one is watching? What parts of me have I hidden to be acceptable? University promised independence, but with freedom came a confrontation with the self. Class discussions encouraged debate. Exposure to diverse ideas challenged inherited beliefs, and new environments revealed the limits of her carefully crafted persona. For the first time, Amara realized that performing to meet expectations no longer provided a sense of belonging she had relied on for years. Instead, it generated anxiety, self-doubt, and subtle despair. Psychologists call this stage emerging adulthood, a period characterized by exploration and identity development. According to Erik Erikson, young adults face the conflict of identity versus role confusion. Amara's confusion was compounded by the cumulative influence of early feedback, peer comparison, and societal propaganda. Every decision, what career to pursue, what friend group to trust, what values to adopt, was filtered through the lens of her persona rather than her authentic self. One afternoon, walking through campus, she overheard students discussing internships and achievements. Everyone seemed confident, accomplished, self-assured. Amara's chest tightened. Why do I feel like an imposter? The mask she had spent a lifetime perfecting now felt like a cage, limiting expression, spontaneity, and joy. Her authentic ideas, passions, and even her emotions felt foreign, like strangers living inside her. Even social interactions reflected the tension. With friends, she laughed at jokes she didn't find funny, agreed with opinions she didn't hold, and avoided topics she feared might reveal her flaws. Social identity theory, developed by Henri Tajfel, explains that people derive a sense of self from group memberships, but Amara's group memberships demanded persona that didn't align with her true thoughts. She was admired, liked, and accepted, but at the cost of her inner voice. It wasn't all bleak. Quiet moments of creativity, late-night journaling, and solitary walks offered glimpses of freedom. Jung would describe these as a shadow emerging, hidden aspect of the psyche that demand acknowledgement. Her suppressed anger, curiosity, creativity, and intuition were calling for recognition. And yet, confronting them was terrifying. To acknowledge the shadow was to risk chaos, imperfection, and social disapproval. Pause for reflection. In your own life, where do you feel trapped by roles, expectations, or the need to perform? Which parts of yourself have you suppressed to meet external demands, only to feel restless or disconnected? If you feel seen in Amara's struggle, subscribe, leave a like, and comment your reflections. Recognizing the tension between persona and shadow is a crucial step in reclaiming authenticity, and it is a journey shared by everyone navigating societal, peer, and internal pressures. Amara's early adulthood had been a life lived through mirrors: family, teachers, peers, media, and society. Each reflected expectations, ideals, and subtle propaganda, shaping her self-perception, masking her authenticity, and burying her desires. But one evening, sitting alone in her small apartment, she felt a subtle shift. A question surfaced quietly, persistently. What parts of me have I been ignoring all this time? Jung called the hidden, suppressed aspects of the psyche the shadow. It contained everything Amara had been taught was unacceptable: her anger, her vulnerability, her rebellious ideas, her creativity, her curiosity. For years, she had feared these parts, believing they were dangerous or unworthy. Yet now, she realized they had never left. They were simply waiting for recognition. Her first step was awareness. Amara began observing herself without judgment. She noticed moments when fear dictated her decisions, when social comparison dictated her self-worth, and when she had silenced her authentic voice. She journaled her thoughts, revisited old sketches, and reflected on times she'd been most uncomfortable in groups, at school, and online. Each observation cracked open a small window into the self she had long denied. Psychologists call this differentiation, the ability to step back and recognize that thoughts, emotions, and social expectations are not inherently you. They're influences you can observe, understand, and consciously respond to. As Amara began to differentiate, she noticed a profound truth. She was not the mask she wore, nor was she only the suppressed shadow. She was the awareness in which all of this appeared. Integration came gradually. She allowed herself to express opinions she once silenced. She embraced creative projects without seeking approval. She set boundaries in friendships and work, noticing discomfort when she returned to automatic compliance. Each choice strengthened the connection to her authentic self, while reducing control of external propaganda over her self-perception. Even society's pressures did not disappear. Social media, peer comparison, and cultural ideals continued to exist, but they no longer dictated her self-worth. She could scroll, observe, and decide consciously whether to let these influences shape her day. Where fear and anxiety once ruled, now curiosity and agency emerged. Jung emphasized that true individuation, the lifelong journey of becoming whole, requires courage to face the self, including both light and shadow. Reflect on this. What masks are you ready to loosen? Which societal, peer, or media-driven expectations have shaped your self-perception? And how might the act of simply observing your thoughts, desires, and fears without judgment open a pathway toward wholeness? Amara's journey shows that freedom doesn't come from destroying the ego or rejecting society. It comes from putting influence in its proper place, integrating the shadow, and embracing the self as the awareness behind all experiences. Life becomes less about performing and more about participating consciously, with depth, authenticity, and presence. If you found this story meaningful, subscribe, leave a like, and share your reflections in the comments. Stories like Amara's help us understand the subtle ways propaganda shapes self-perception, and remind us that the path to authenticity begins the moment we recognize the masks we wear. Remember, the first time you observe the mask and the shadow within, you're already more than they ever defined you to be.